technique. Now, this is different to study scheduling because study scheduling just talks about when to do the revision, but the revision technique is what we're doing during those revision sessions. So if you haven't watched the study scheduling video, you can go and watch that first. However, this is again just the fundamentals. So whatever technique that you learn from here, if it's new, make sure that you're practicing it, giving it a go. If it is something that you're already doing, props to you, but we will be building on all of this in the course to come. This is just to lay that foundation. So whatever you're comfortable doing, just do that. Get comfortable, build a little bit of practice here. Don't stress too much about it though. The only way that you can fail this section is to not do anything. But if you do diligently apply these techniques and get a little bit used to them, then you'll start seeing some great benefits. When it comes to revision, there is a very basic triad that I teach to students. Each of these things we will actually elaborate on later on, and so they can actually be quite technical when we get down to how we can do it perfectly and extract the maximum amount of learning from it. But even if you do it wrong, you will still get quite a lot of benefit from doing this. And this triad is called test, target, and teach. And if you follow test, target, and teach, you're gonna be in the right ballpark of effective revision strategies. So when we say test, what we're saying is to make sure that you are applying your knowledge, and that's the most important thing. So the reason why past practice papers and past exams and things like that are so valuable as part of your revision is because it's forcing you to apply the knowledge, and applying knowledge is a different cognitive process to other forms of revision, especially when it comes to problem solving. And it gets a little bit technical and I won't go into it quite yet, but that's a big reason. This different process is a big reason why people find past questions and practice papers so effective for their revision strategy. But we can actually do this in a couple different ways as well. So you remember I talked about putting yourself in the perspective of an examiner and creating your own assessment questions. Well, this is another way that you can actually test your knowledge. The idea is that as long as you are applying the information in a way, you are going to be hitting it from an angle that you normally don't apply it in. And if you're trying to apply it in a way that you know you're probably not thinking about or not used to, then that's even better, which leads on to the second point, which was target. There is a very strong, quite a logical, but biologically wired bias for us when we're revising to actually focus on the things that we know we're better at. We almost don't want to admit that there's something that we don't know, maybe because it's destabilizing and it makes us feel anxious and nervous when a test or an exam is imminently coming up. But it's, for obvious reasons, very important to focus on the areas of weakness first. So when you're revising, if you have, let's say, 10 hours to revise and you spend 6 of those hours only revising the stuff that you already are pretty strong on, then that's a very ineffective use of your time. Even if there is stuff within the material that you're strong on that you're not 100% on, if there are things that you are very weak on and you're relegating that to the end of your study session or revision, or you're not prioritizing it, then that's the material that you know you have the lowest chance in getting good marks on, that you know is going to be accessible, that you are deliberately leaving until later and instead focusing on the 1 or 2 points here and there in the material that you're strong with. So we need to flip that order. Always start with your weakest area of revision first. So build the weakest areas until they are very strong, and then move on to your next weakest areas. And when you start doing this, you will start feeling much more confident with the information because you don't have that niggly thought in the back of your mind that there is stuff that you know that you're not very good on, that you're hoping they don't test you on. You shouldn't want that. You should be happy for them to test you on anything because you have focused on your weaknesses. And again, that method of testing through deliberately looking for ways of applying information that you may not be so comfortable with, that is a method of revision that is going to target your weaknesses as well as apply the information, which is why it's such a good technique. And even when you learn the later techniques, it's something that you should continue to take and carry on forward. And the final thing is teach. So teaching is really where it starts getting very technical because there are different ways to teach, and it even makes a difference whether you teach a group versus teach a single student versus teaching an imaginary student. versus teaching an entire topic versus teaching a specific concept versus teaching an entire subject, versus teaching mentally versus teaching out loud versus teaching while you're writing things or not writing things or drawing things, and the order in which you teach things, and then the frameworks that you use while you're teaching things and the terminology that you use. Every single one of these things actually changes the level of retention and learning that you get from that revision technique. So teaching is overall a really good strategy to use, but it can get really technical. We will go into that quite a bit later in the course. But for now in your revision, get into the habit of teaching the content to an imaginary student. Okay? As long as you're trying your best to teach it in a logical and effective way that seems to make sense, then you will be applying the information again in a different way. The difference in an application between just testing your knowledge through the previous ways, like asking questions and making questions and doing practice questions, versus teaching it, is that when you have questions, you're looking at it in terms of a problem-solving angle. When you are teaching it, you are focused on trying to compare and contrast different ideas with each other so that you can make sense of the information. For example, if you're teaching something and the way you teach it is literally just listing things out, down a line, fact by fact by fact, it's actually not very easy for someone to listen and understand it, which is not really teaching, right? That's kind of just more like narrating or dictating. Teaching means you have to make it make sense for the person that's listening. And when you try to make something make sense when you're speaking it, it forces you to think about, how am I going to express this? What's the order I'm going to use? What's my order or flow of ideas? How am I going to introduce these new concepts? How am I going to explain these details? What analogies am I going to use? It really forces you to examine the information from an angle that you usually don't look at unless, of course, you are naturally used to teaching for whatever reason. But it's often people will say that teaching is one of the most effective forms of revision, and I completely agree. Again, different levels of teaching. Some teaching is a little bit effective, some teaching is very, very effective, and it does get quite technical, so I'm not going to go into that quite yet. But for now, if you're not already using teaching as part of your revision, then you should definitely be using it. And I personally recommend that you use this as your 1 week revision. It's a really good balance point. It means that you're able to cover a lot of information through teaching, find a lot of gaps, and focus your revision in on those areas and target them. And it means that you can save your practice papers and your questions and all that hard problem-solving testing to your 1 month revision. So a few different techniques that we can use here, but if you follow the guidelines of test, teach, and target in whatever order that you want, then you'll be in the right ballpark, and you're going to find that your revision is a lot more effective overall. But again, remember, work with what you're comfortable with. Take the baby steps one at a time. Don't stress, don't overwhelm yourself. If it's too hard to do all of this stuff, just take what you can do and start with that. The important thing is that you build some momentum so that we make your later stages much easier, and you get the benefits straight away from using these techniques as early as possible.